Tonight's shiur, as always, Le'ilu Nishmat Avi Mori Dober Meir Ben Ruben Halevi Imi Maroti Rachel Bat Harav Michael. And this week we have the privilege of reading parshat Bo, which describes the actual Yetziat Mitzrayim, the event that we celebrate every Pesach, where they actually leave Egypt. And of course, the final three plagues appear in our parsha. But I'm going to focus on one very, very seemingly trivial aspect of the entire Exodus. And that is the concept that Am Yisrael had to bring a whole lot of stuff with them that they might not have expected to take with them. So we're going to immediately go to the sources, but if you're looking, this is really, the source appears twice. Once where, actually it's really three times in the Torah this concept appears. Once is actually way back at the burning bush where Hashem, hello? Can everybody hear me? Once is where Hashem tells Moshe at the burning bush that this is going to happen. Second time is when he tells him right before Makat Bechorot to tell Am Yisrael to go and do this. And the third time the Torah mentions this concept of them having lots of stuff is when they actually leave. So we're going to go to those psukim and we're going to focus on a few different words here that appear in this week's parsha. So the first occurrence, actually, as I said, is by the burning bush. We're going to leave that for a few minutes and get back to that. Jackie, David, you're having technical difficulties. If you can mute, please. Thank you. Okay. In Parak Yud Aleph, which in beginning of Parak Yud Aleph, Moshe is just finished. We've just finished the plague of darkness. Moshe is about to introduce the last plague that's going to be brought. And Hashem tells Moshe, I'm going to bring one more plague. After that, he's going to throw you all out. And when he sends you out, you will completely and totally throw you out. That's it. You're going to leave. Now, he tells Moshe the following, Daber na bi'aznei ha'am. Please speak in the ears of the people. I translated no as please. By the way, no, you'll notice is highlighted in yellow. There are two very different translations of the word na in Hebrew. Actually, there are three. In the Torah usage of the word na, we generally think of the word na as meaning please, and that's why you noticed I automatically translate it. But na can also mean now, and na can also mean something that is eaten as is, i.e. raw. So we have those three meanings of the word na in the Torah. And here we're going to try to understand whether daber na means speak now or speak please, and we're going to see different interpretations of that. V'yish alu. And they shall request. Now, the word Yish Alu also has two different meanings. In the word Shin Aleph Lamed has two different meanings. One, it means to ask a question, to ask somebody for something. But it also, in certain contexts, means to borrow something. So the question here is, when it says Yish Alu Ish Me'esh Re'ehu, each person is to ask from his neighbor and each woman from her neighbor to borrow silver and gold vessels. Is it they're asking them to give them a gift, or they're asking them to lend them? We're going to see again, the parshanim are going to be split on that, but those are the two of the things we're going to try to focus on. And then the pasuk continues, despite the fact that we would have expected the Jews, after all these years, to be a despised people in the eyes of the Egyptian, Hashem sees to it that the Egyptian, the average day-to-day Egyptian, looks at the Israelites favorably. And similarly, Moshe himself is, in the eyes of the Egyptians, he was favored, even in the eyes of Paro as well as the common folk, the servants of Paro, all had this very, very positive feeling toward Moshe. It wasn't that they felt negative toward him, it seems. Okay, now that's where Hashem tells Moshe what to do. And if we look later on, as they're leaving, it tells us the following in Parak Yud Bet. Uvnei Yisrael asuki dvar Moshe. They did exactly as Moshe had requested by Yishalu Mitzrayim. And they again requested. Notice the words, the same word Yishalu was asked that we said, that we saw above, highlighted in yellow, was highlighted here. Klei chesav u'klei zahav, but also usmalot and garments. Hashem natan et cheinam b'nei Mitzrayim vayash ilum. Hashem caused the people to be viewed favorably by the Egyptians, and they agreed, and they acceded to the request. Whether it was a request for borrowing or a request for gifts, we don't know yet. And they emptied out Egypt. Now, again, I want to just do a quick comparison between the burning bush, where Hashem foretells to Moshe that this is what's going to happen. And it's interesting that when he talks to Moshe at the burning bush, the concept of Chen ha'am hazeh b'nei Mitzrayim precedes the request. Interestingly enough, when Hashem speaks to Moshe at the burning bush, which is at your far right, it says, that Hashem says, I will cause the people to be favored in the eyes of the Egyptian. And then it adds, therefore, when you leave, you're not going to leave empty-handed. How? Because each woman is going to ask from her neighbor. Interestingly enough, the men are not mentioned in the burning bush. It only says the women are going to borrow from their neighbors and those that live in the area. Notice here again, there's going to silver, gold, and fancy garments. Why? Because the women want to have fancy clothes. The guys don't really care what they're wearing. The women need to have fancy clothes. If they're going on a holiday, a 3-day holiday here, we need fancy clothes. So it says smalot, v'samtem, and then Hashem tells Moshe at the burning bush, you'll place them on your children, and you will empty out Egypt. Now again, when Hashem commands Moshe, and when they carry out the command, it says Vayishalu comes first, and then it says Vashem natan l'cheinam b'Mitzrayim. Again, you'll notice the very, very similar phraseology between all three of these points. Point one, where Hashem tells Moshe at the burning bush it's going to happen. Point two, where Hashem tells Moshe to tell Am Yisrael to do it. And point three, where it tells the Yisrael did exactly what they were commanded to do. So we're going to try to focus on this exchange of silver, gold, and clothing between the Egyptians and the Bnei Yisrael, and what its purpose is. So we're going to start, firstly, I also want to quote one verse back in Bereshit, way back when Hashem speaks to Avram at Brit Ben B'Tarim. Hashem tells Avram the following: Vayamali Avram, he tells Avram, you should surely know that your descendants are going to be strangers in Be'eretz Lo Lahem, in a land that does not belong to them. Vavadum, they will ultimately enslave them. V'inu osam, they will afflict them. Arbami ochana, there'll be a period of 400 years. And Hashem promises Avram back then, 400 years before the Exodus, the Gamet Hagoy Asher Yavodu Donanochi, this nation that enslaves them, Hashem says, I will judge. The Acharechen Yetzu Bechush Gadol, and after the slavery is over, they will leave with great possessions. So we're going to try to focus on what did Hashem mean when he told that to Avram. Those are the three things we're going to try to focus on. What does Na mean? What is the Indian of Sheila mean? What was the request? And we're going to start with the Gemara in Brachot. Gemara in Brachot tells us that Hashem tells Moshe, Daber Na. Now I told you, Na can have two different meanings. One can mean speak now, do it now immediately, or Daber Na means please speak to the people. So the Gemara brings down the following interpretation of that verse. Rabbi Yanai, in Yeshiva Rabbi Yanai, they taught the following interpretation of this pasuk. Ein na, this usage of the word na, ela lashon bakasha, it's a request. It's Hashem is pleading with Moshe, please do this. Amar le HaKadosh Baruch Hu Moshe, Hashem is telling Moshe, bevakasha mimacha, I am asking you, please, lech v'emar lahem liYisrael, go tell Yisrael. I'm asking you, Moshe, that you should please do this. But what you have to tell him, Yisrael, is bakasha michem. I, Hashem, am asking you to do a favor for me. What is that favor? Shalom Mitzrayim. You should ask of the Egyptians, klei kesef u'klei zahav, silver and gold vessels. Shalo yomar oto tzadik, so that the righteous individual, of course, he's referring here to Avram Avinu, should not say, "Avadum v'inu otam kiyam." Hashem, that was very nice of you. You fulfilled the part of the prophecy that said they would enslave them and afflict them. But the part that you said you promised they'd leave with great possessions, you didn't fulfill, Hashem. Hashem, what did you do to my children here, Avram would say. That's what the Gemara says. So that's why Hashem has to plead with Am Yisrael that they should collect all this stuff to take with them. So just so Avram Avinu won't be able to complain to HaKadosh Baruch Hu. Amru lo, Bnei Yisrael answered Moshe, what kind of nonsense? Halavai, we should be free. Who cares what we take with us? I'm not interested in how to collect positions. I just want to get out of Egypt. Mashal, and the Gemara gives an example. Mashal, take anybody who's in prison. And people, and the warden says to him, some point in the future you will be freed, and they'll give you a big bonus for being staying in prison. They'll give you lots of money. The Omer Lohem, and he'll say, what is he going to say back to the warden? He says, please. I'd rather leave today rather than stay till tomorrow or who knows when, and I don't need you to pay me anything. Just let me out of here. So that's the mashal. Similarly, Am Yisrael said to Moshe, why do we need to ask stuff? We just want to get out of here. We're not looking for payoffs here. We just want to get out of here. Now the Gemara goes a little bit further and says the following. The pasuk continues with that the Egyptians acceded to their request by using the word vayash ilum. And they either, again, as I said, either gave them gifts or they lent them stuff. Either meaning works with vayash ilum. So Amar of Ami. Rav Ami says the fact that it says vayash ilum and they acceded to being borrowed, melamed shish ilum ba'al karcham. That this exchange, again, whether it was giving of gifts or it was a loan, was done against their will. Ba'al karcham means if somebody does something, really didn't want to do it, but they were kind of forced to do it. Now, Ika de Amre, there's one opinion that says, what does it mean, Ba'al karcham, that it was a forced? Ba'al karcham de Mitzrayim, that the Egyptians felt forced. They felt they had no choice, but they had to do it. Ika de Amre, Ba'al karcham de Yisrael, and others say, it was the Jews who were kind of coerced into accepting this stuff. Manda Amar Ba'al karcham de Mitzrayim, the one who says that it was the Egyptians were forced to obviously, when you divide up spoils, it's, who wants to give away their stuff? However, the ones who said the Jews were forced to accept this, they didn't really want to, mishum masoy, because they knew they were going on a journey. They didn't want to be weighted down with any excess goods. They wanted to be able to travel as fast as possible to get away as far as possible from Egypt. So they didn't need any baggage, excess baggage. So, but again, Hashem sort of forced them, they had to take it. Okay, now, the Gemara really doesn't say whether Vayash Ilum is as a gift or as a loan, but Rashbam says Vayish Alu. Vayish Alu, the word Shin Aleph Lamed, the majority of the times it's used in the Torah is a question or a request for something. And here Rashbam says V'ishalu l'shem matana gemura. They should request that the Egyptians give them gifts. Period. Matana gemura, a full gift. As we have a pasuk that says that if we ask from Hashem, He will give us things that we need. Again, not as a loan, not as a temporary thing, but as a full gift. Okay, and we're going to see others who are going to disagree with that. And bring down both opinions too. Rashi says, now we're going back to this na. Does na mean please, like the Gemara said, or does na mean now? And Rashi quotes the Gemara almost verbatim, Eino elalashon vakasha, vakasha mimcha, he's hiram al kach shelo yomer oto tzadik Avraham, v'avodim yinotam kiyem bahem, v'achrechen yitz b'chush gadol kiyem. Basically quotes the Gemara that this na here is a request, like the Gemara said. And Rashi, if we go back to that pasuk in Bereshit with Avram Avinu, tells us that what does Rechush Gadol means? The Mammon Gadol. That the Rechush Gadol that Hashem promised Avram was that they would leave with some wealth, physical, tangible wealth. That's what Rashi translates Rechush Gadol to mean. And he says, as we see here, they do leave with some possessions. Okay. Now, Sivzeh Chachamim, who brings down one of the commentaries on Rashi, says the following from Gur Aryeh. The Maharal says the following: Nearly It appears to me the Maral says Shehutzruch Lomar. He's Hiram al Kaf. The Gemara is forced to say, and Rashi is forced to say that he Moshe has to warn them to make sure they do it. You have to do it. Even though it's for their benefit. Here we're giving you gold, silver, nice, beautiful clothing. You would say, hey, it's for our benefit. Why do I have to be coerced into doing this? Moshe was concerned that Hashem is concerned that Am Yisrael is going to say, oh, if you're doing this for our benefit, well, thanks, we don't want it. Like we said before with the mashal, I'd rather just get out today. I don't need anything else. So the fact is, if something is for my benefit, I can say, thank you, but I don't want it. I understand doing something for my own benefit, but I don't want it. Lefikach, Amar Sheyaz Hiram Alkaf. That's why Hashem says, no, you got to warn them that they got to do it. Kedei sheyu mikuyam hakatuv v'gamet hagoya sheyavodu don anochi v'acharechein yitzu b'chush gadol. The whole reason Hashem has to come to Moshe and say, no, you got to coerce the Jews to do this, is because they could have said, thanks, but no thanks. I don't want to embarrass myself, go to my Egyptian, who I don't really know. He's not my best buddy, and go borrow stuff or ask for a gift, whichever one it is. I don't need that. I just want to get out of here. I don't need to go get involved in all of this. So that's why we need this. He's Hiram. Hashem tells Moshe, you got to warn them. I want them to do it. Okay. Radak, interestingly enough, gives us a reason why Hashem tells Avram they'll leave with great possessions. This is back in Bereshit. Radak says the following. Why are they was after all this they're going to leave with great scar? Acharei tashlum 400 shana yetzu minu avodah b'mamon rav chelav avodatam asher avadum. Basically, they've been there for 400 years. It's only 210, but Hashem is telling Avram that at the end of this period of servitude, they're going to get paid for all that overtime that they did all those years in one fell swoop. It's all going to be and they're going to have big bank accounts because they're getting paid for a lot of work. So that's what Radak says. Again, Rechush Gadol simply means payment for all the work they did for all of those years. Okay, Klei Yakar. Klei Yakar again quotes the Gemara as follows: Daber Navi as Neham. Amru Chazal ein no el lashon bakashash lo yomar tzatzadik v'avodim yisam kinu b'hem v'achrechem tzu v'kosh lo kiyam b'hem. Same thing. You go to the Gemara that no is a request. And it's a request because Hashem wants to be able to fulfill the promise he made to Abraham. So Am Yisrael has to do that. The Kosha, Klei Yakar doesn't understand. I have a problem. Lama tala kiyum haftachato b'mirat oto tzadik. You mean to tell me that the only reason, Klei Yakar, the only reason Hashem kept the promise was because he told it to Abraham? If he hadn't said it to Abraham, made the promise to Abraham, he wouldn't keep his promise? Why? What do you mean? Because Avram's going to complain he didn't keep his promise. Shem made a promise. He's going to keep the promise. What is this? Why does he have to bring Avram Avinu into it? The nearly Yashiv al davar zeh shemasik from Masechet Brachot v'ashilum bal korcham di Yisrael. So he says it has to be that the reason that Hashem has to rely on this reason to make them do this is because since we just learned that one of the opinions says that this whole thing was forced upon Am Yisrael because they didn't really want to take it because Masui Hadera. They would have had too much to carry. They didn't want to be laden down with all this extra goods. Ulefizen, according to this, Yatsa Hashem Yedei Avtachato K'Shemar Lehem Makom Hashaboti Kaim Avtachato. By Hashem saying, hey, here's all the money. You want to take it, you can take it. You don't want to take it, you don't have to take it. He's already fulfilled his promise to Avram. I gave him the money. They didn't want to take it. What do you want from me, Avraham? Right? What else can Hashem do? If they don't want to take the money, what is Hashem going to do? Right? In other words, if you say somebody here, I got a gift for you, and the guy says, well, thanks, but no thanks. There's nothing you can do about it. Hashem did all he could do to make sure they had wealth. So that's it. You didn't want it. You didn't have to take it. When we call Makom Yesh Lakush Yomer Oto Tzadik, so since Avram Avinu wouldn't know, he won't understand somehow. I don't know why Avram understood that they didn't get it, but he didn't understand that they didn't want to take it. I don't know, but that's what Klei Yakar says. Avram Avinu wouldn't have understood that Hashem was willing to give it to them, but they didn't want to take it. Uvavur sheyod Avram tzadik v'yashar. Since Avram was an upright person, it won't be right in his eyes that the Egyptians enslaved the Jews and didn't have to pay for that. Therefore, Hashem promised that in the end they'll receive their pay for all that work that they did. That they will take this wealth only from the Egyptians, because the Egyptians are the only one who owed them the money. Therefore, it says in the pasuk, after that they will leave. When you hire somebody, according to Torah law, you pay him at the end of the job. You don't pay him part way and part way all the way. So at the end of the job was now 400 years. They worked for 400 years. Now they get their whole 400 years worth of pay. The Alpha, and even though certainly there was no problem, Hashem could have found another way for the Jews to get this wealth instead of having to take from the Egyptians derech she'elav rama'ut in a way that seems underhanded. They're borrowing something that they have no intent to give back. So here we see clearly Yakar translates she'elah as a borrowing. In other words, they're borrowing it. Nonetheless, God was the God of justice, did this because it's not, even though they're asking for it in an underhanded or a negative way, they deserved it as payment for all of the work. As we see in the Gemara in Chulin, which has a case where the Egyptians came to Alexander the Great and complained that the Jews owed him all the money that they took out of Egypt. And the Jews sent this gentleman, Gvia ben Psisa, says, I'll leave it. I'll go explain to the Egyptians. I'll take your case and bring it to Alexander. Goes to Alexander and says, okay, where's the wages we owe for 400 years? Then you give us that, and we'll give you back all the stuff we took when we left Egypt. No problem. Okay, and they went back. The Egyptians went back and came back 3 days later, and they never came back to Alexander because the complaint was basically washed away. So we see clearly that there is seems to be, at least the Gemara seems to imply that there's some connection between what they took out of Egypt and the fact that they weren't paid for all of those years. Therefore, Abraham would not have been comforted unless they took this money from the Egyptians, not from somebody else, because the Egyptians are the one who owed him the money. At least his way Avram is able to accept comfort for all the fact that they were enslaved so hard for all these years. And that's what it means that he didn't fulfill this thing, that he didn't fulfill that they ultimately got paid for their work. Okay. Chizkuni, remember, we said Daber Na. We said Rashi and the Gemara said Na means bivakasha, it's a request. Chizkuni says exactly the opposite. Daber achshav bi'aznei. Daber Na, when Hashem tells Moshe right before the plague of Makat Bechor, now is the time. Daber Na here means achshav. Now you got to tell Am Yisrael. Why? He ain't showed b'davar me'achar sheyelchu lahem mikol v'chol. There's no time left. There's no time now to delay. You've got to do it right now because we're leaving. If Hashem had given Moshe this command prior to the other plagues, if the Egyptians would have lent them stuff, they would have asked for it to be returned already. Especially when they saw that Paro was keeping them here. Well, we want our stuff back now, right? But the question now we have to ask is, why did Hashem cause Am Yisrael to fulfill this request or this prophecy that he told Avram? Why? Through borrowing. Why? There's a reason, he says. The reason that they wanted, that Hashem tells them specifically, borrow the stuff, not ask them for gifts, because it gives the Egyptians additional incentive to chase after them. Hey, wait a minute, they're running away with all that stuff they borrowed from us. If they were running away with all those gifts we gave them, you wouldn't have that same incentive to run after and chase them. However, he also brings down Chizkios of Yesh Mefarshim, and there are those that explain Dish Alu Lashon Matana Gemura Moshe Al Mimeni Viet Nogoyim. Again, he quotes those that say that the request here is not a request for a loan; it's a request for a gift. Okay, okay, let's go. Bechor Shor. Bechor Shor really lays out here now. Bechor Shor, this is actually when Hashem speaking to Moshe at the burning bush. He says he tells Moshe exactly what's going to happen. What's going to happen? Shetomar law. All of the Jewish women are going to say, we're going to a festival. I don't have anything good to wear. I got nothing to, Ashileni, Kesa, Kos Kesa, give me a good becher, give me some good jewelry to put on. I got to look nice. Because I don't want to be embarrassed. The only one coming with nothing, no jewelry, no fancy stuff to eat with, to drink with, whatever. Also, I gotta have fancy clothes. I got have fancy jewelry and fancy clothes. That's why it's the women are asking here. And Hashem promises, I will allow that they will lend them. The Egyptian women will lend them. And I also am promising that ultimately you will achieve all of these things will come into your possession through properly. That's what Hashem says to Moshe, as he's going to explain later on. Okay. Daber na. Okay, again, Bechor Shor also follows the opinion that Daber na means Daber ata. Ki showed od yoter, because there's no more time left. We got to do it now. We're leaving right away. V'yishalu k'moshe pirashti, that they should ask either way, that they should ask for loans preferably. However, Mishmot apasuk uvinyan ha'olam k'moshe omrot hash'il li klei kesav v'zahav u'begadecha chamudot. Lend me your nice utensils that I can use and your beautiful garments. Again, so I will be honored. I won't be looked down upon with everybody else. And Hashem made it so that even though they asked for these things as loans, the Egyptians still believed and trusted the Jewish people, because that's who they were. And ultimately, the Egyptians had nobody to claim it back after they all died at Yam Suf. Okay. Shiur Ma'on. Shiur Ma'on, just in case, since it's a parshat I don't is a lot, this is Rabbi Shimon Sofer, son of the Ktav Sofer, grandson of the Chatam Sofer, and who was also, was killed in the Holocaust, tells us the following. Brachot, it quotes the Gemara in La Okay, he quotes first the Gemara that we quoted, that Hashem pleads with Bnei Yisrael to please, ask the Egyptians. V'hu tamua, and I don't understand. Lama davar zeh b'vakasha. Why does he have to request it? V'yesh lomer, and he says, T'kvar tamu al zeh, hello davar zeh sheshalu mehem nira kiramaot. Why? Everybody wonders, why does Hashem ask them to make this in the language of a loan? It seems like they're trying to cheat them. The Bnei Yisrael yadu shelo yachzor l'Mitzrayim. The Jews already knew that once they leave, they're not coming back. How they knew that? Because Moshe told them that already, that Hashem was going to take them out. But Mitzrayim, however, the Egyptians, remember, the Paro, he's always asked for is a 3-day leave. 3-day trip leave, 1 week leave, 3 days to go, 1 day to have the stocks, 3 days to come back. It's a 1 week leave. I'm not asking for. They thought they're all coming back. And we proof of that they expected them to come back. It's later on, Paro finds out that the people have run away. Paro runs to go after them to bring them back, because they expected them to come back. Period. Hashem owns everything, so he took stuff from the Egyptians and gave it to us. What's the problem? That's perfectly nice. Yeah, that's all very nice, and that's a great answer why we were able to take these things, even though we weren't necessarily fully the truth. That's it. Kasha. Madua natan lema kadosh baruch hu al dat zerachush gadol she'achar kach yidabru sora al yisrael shnogu ro amos. Why did they have to take this in such a fashion that everybody leaves the door open for anybody who reads the Torah to say the Jews are a bunch of cheaters? Anybody who reads it, hey, they're a bunch of cheaters. They tricked the Egyptians into giving this stuff as a loan and then kept it. Now he's doing the answer. It's really, they didn't ask them as loans, they asked them as gifts. In other words, they asked them, hey, you've been watching me work all this time. How about a gift before I leave? Well, now according to this, now if you're telling me that they had to go to the Egyptians and ask for gifts, now I understand why he has to really plead with Am Yisrael to do this. How many people do go around to other people and say, hey, where's my gift? I need a gift. Come on, let's have some gifts here. Come on. And we say that every day when we say Birkat Hamazon. We say, we shouldn't need gifts from people. We shouldn't need their loans. That's why he asked him Bakasha, because if they're asking this as a gift, it's a lot harder to go to ask somebody, hey, give me a gift. Come on, I want a gift. What do you mean? No. So that's why he has to plead with Am Yisrael to do this, because they're getting gifts. Okay. Okay. Again, we're going to go more. Right? Okay. It's not appropriate. Again, now he's going back to the fact that it was a loan. It's not appropriate to ask to borrow something and not pay it back. But Ibn Ezra answers, they didn't have a choice. Hashem says you got to ask them for loans. We did. The only reason they asked for it this way was because Hashem told them that. Now, since everything a person owns is owned really by Hashem, Hashem wanted all of this wealth to be transferred to Am Yisrael. So Hashem says, do it. That's what you got to do. The question still rises, why did Hashem, if Hashem wants to transfer all the wealth of the Egyptians to the Jews, there are certainly plenty of ways he could do it. He could have, made a famine in Egypt and had the Jews suddenly had food and they all had to come and buy food from the Jews. How did the money get to Egypt in the first place? Everybody came to Yosef and bought food, right? That's how the money got to Egypt in the first place. Why do you have to pick this way, which again, it seems that the Jews are, swindlers here. There are plenty of ways he could have done this. The Od Kashan, another question. Again, the Gemara uses this double lashon. Hashem says to Moshe, I have to beg you to ask Am Yisrael. You're going to have to beg Am Yisrael to ask the Egyptians. Why do we need this? And that ultimately they're going to keep it. Why do I have to beg them to do it? If they're going to get all this wealth and they know they're going to keep it, why did Moshe have to beg them? The nearly appears to me, he says, HaKadosh Baruch Hu, Amar v'yishalu, rak al dat lachzir hakol. They should borrow it, and they intended originally to give it all back. V'lachein lo ratzu Yisrael. Because therefore, Am Yisrael didn't want to ask. They didn't want to borrow all this stuff from the Egyptians if they're going to have to return it. Why? Why do I need to borrow all this silver and gold stuff? Now I'm responsible for them until I give it back. If I'm borrowing something, I got this responsibility. They weren't accustomed to using silver and gold things. Who cares? We could have used the same stuff we've been using for the last 100 years. Why do I need suddenly silver and gold and fancy stuff? The lama lahem. Why would they even need it? But Hashem, Yodea Atitot, who knows the future, is Hasidim Mitzrayim Lishko b'Yam Suf. We know that all the Egyptians are going to drown in the Yam Suf. The Uz, once the owners of all the silver and gold that you borrowed have died, there's nobody to pay it back to. They're all dead. The Gamli Yershim Petur Lachsir, and you don't have to return it to their Yershim, even though by Korban Goy is Yoresh Aviv Min Torah, nonetheless, Shavkat Malva Shabata Behetel Yisrael Ein Tzorach Lahachsir. When you borrow money from a guy and the guy dies, you don't have to. You've now removed the shibud, the any lien that is on that property to bring it back. As long as it doesn't cause the chil Hashem. Now, since they were all dead, certainly wasn't going to cause a chil Hashem. The ode, and the other reason is that they couldn't return it. You're not allowed to go back to Egypt ever again. So now Yisrael can claim, hey, not our fault that we didn't bring all the stuff back. Everybody was dead. There was nobody to claim it. And Hashem told us we're not allowed to come back to bring it back. So therefore they were patur from returning it. And everything seems fine. So again, he basically brings two different ways. One is, if they were borrowing the stuff, they had no opportunity to give it back. If they were taking his gifts, they really didn't want to take it as gifts because of this problem of, it's not so nice to ask people for gifts. But in any case, Hashem wants them to take all this money out. Okay. All right, let's continue here. One more here. Daber Navios Neham. Again, the Gemara says, we've already quoted the Gemara a number of times, Shloimar Tzadik. Now, Tamua. Again, same question that Kleyakar asked. Hashem only fulfills his promises because Avram is going to complain that he didn't fulfill it? How can Hashem make a promise for good and not fulfill it? Promises for bad, we know he doesn't fulfill if the person does tshuva. But promise for good, he's got to fulfill. The ode, why now is he's saying that he only made this promise because of Avram Avinu, to fulfill something to Avram Avinu. The Yesh Lomar. And now he gives an example. B'mitzrayim hayu hagufim ba'avoda kasha. The physical part of the Jewish people was busy in Egypt doing harsh labor. Kidduch as it tells us, they were making mud and bricks. All kinds of harsh labor in the field. And also the souls of the people were also afflicted. Why? They were so degraded, they had completely forgotten lost almost all connection to God. Mitzvah. They lost all connection to the mitzvah. They worshipped idols. They stopped performing circumcisions. They had basically almost completely disintegrated as a people. The lashon inoy in this affliction, koi al nefesh. So in addition to the slavery that they were going through with their bodies, they were also, their neshamot were also being afflicted by the fact that they were distanced from HaKadosh Baruch Hu and they were becoming almost like the Egyptians. The harsh labor they felt, the physical, they felt all the time. But the affliction that their souls were going through, they were so sunk in the Egyptian depravity, they didn't even realize, they didn't even feel. So the whole one of the two aspects of this slavery, one was the physical aspect, the other was the aspect that their nefesh was totally divorced from them. They totally lost all of their spirituality. But for Avraham, he understood how lowly they had become and how impure they had become. This great reward that Hashem promised Am Yisrael, that Hashem promised would give, it didn't have to be only from the Egyptians. Elagam Anasim Hananim Yuchlulo read Imamon Afni Shom Agilot Moshul Anasim Tzorach Hamishkan. Hashem could have provided it anyway. Could have had stuff rain down with the man or stuff rain down from the clouds. We didn't need to get it from the Egyptians. By taking all of the money out of Egypt, all of the hidden sparks of Kedusha that were buried in Egypt, that they had lost, that they had lost in Egypt, misplaced, were all somehow got attached to these gifts that they took out. Therefore, in place of the physical labor, they were paid off with gold and silver. However, they had great possession. What were those? The hidden sparks of spirituality that they were able to glean from what they took from Egypt. If the property, the wealth had come from somewhere else, they would have only been paid back for the physical labor. But here they were paid back also for the spiritual affliction that the Egyptians had afflicted by being able to capture all of those sparks of holiness as they left. But the Jews of that generation really didn't understand the great value and the great wealth of these hidden sparks of holiness that they were taking with them. And they only saw the value of the gold and the silver. Because they were so sunk in the Egyptian culture that they didn't even realize how afflicted their souls were. However, only Avram, who understood how spiritual they should have been, and how they had lost that spirituality, he understood that this great reward that they were going out with was not the physical reward, but was the spiritual reward. Therefore, HaKadosh Baruch Hu had to command Abraham as they look at that they would collect all of these hidden sparks as a spiritual possession that would be able to rejuvenate them spiritually. Okay, we're going to skip the rest of this because I'm running out of time. I want to go quickly to a couple of other parshanim in terms of what was this great reward that Hashem promised Avram Avinu, this rechush gadol, this great wealth that they would leave with. Alshif. This is, by the way, these are all this back in Bereshit. Alshif says the following. V'tam, Yilku, I will punish the Egyptians, because I am a judge. V'tam she'ashabdeim halohu ki hinei the whole purpose of the Jews being enslaved, because ultimately they will receive great reward, the revach gadol, but a great profit. What is that? According to Alshif, shisilu kazohamot hanachash al yidei hashibud. Through the being enslaved in Egypt, they are going to lose the zuhama, the ill feeling, this ill-gotten spiritual ruach that the serpent implanted into all human beings is going to be cleansed out of them. They're going to basically sweat out this negative influence of the original sin that Adam and Chava committed by going through this servitude. They're going to be cleansed of that. Through which they will be able to and fit and ready to receive the Torah. In other words, they'll be back to the stage of Adam and Chava before the Chet. They will have reached that level of spirituality. And it will be through the luchot, they will have freedom. When they receive the luchot, they will never again, after they've gone through this slavery of Egypt, if all things go right, they will have the potential never to have to be enslaved again. In other words, if things had gone differently, when Am Yisrael left Egypt, they were on such a high spiritual level where they were able to reach, they were prepared to reach such a high spiritual level by receiving the Torah that they never would have had to be enslaved again, except we all know what happened 40 days after Hashem gave them the Torah. They had free choice in their hands. The Efshir Shalo Yakalklu, it was possible they wouldn't have sinned by the Egel. If things had gone differently, Am Yisrael would have left Egypt, received the Torah, gotten to Eretz Yisrael, built the Beit HaMikdash, and they all would have lived happily ever after. Unfortunately, it didn't quite work out that way. Again, the purpose of the whole slavery in Egypt was to cleanse us so that we would be able to receive the Torah and usher in the Messianic age. As I said, it didn't quite work out that way, but that's Al Shot. Wanted to bring one more shot. No, we're going to skip this. Okay, again, we'll talk about the spiritual values that were received, and I want to just go one more. This Shimon again, Rav Sofer says the following. The own Isa b'midrash, one of the midrash I want to quote, Sharachush Hagadol Matan Torah, as he said, the great rechush that they were going to receive when they left Egypt was Matan Torah. That the primary purpose of leaving Mitzrayim and what Hashem promised Avram meant that when they leave Egypt, they will receive the great spiritual good of Matan Torah, of receiving the Torah and becoming Hashem's people. So in reality, when Moshe asks them to get this physical wealth, it's really a smokescreen. But because they didn't yet understand that the great rechush they were going to receive was Matan Torah, they weren't yet ready. They weren't on the spiritual level, even though they had prepared for a spiritual, they were prepared to rise spiritually. They hadn't yet reached the spiritual level where they would have understood that. And therefore, Hashem has to ask them to take all this wealth with them, and they do. I think it's very interesting that when we look at the Parshanim in terms of trying to juxtapose both the physical redemption and the spiritual redemption from Egypt, we have to understand that the two of them only work together, that we can't have only a physical redemption without a corresponding spiritual redemption. And as we go through life, that has to always be something that we keep in the forefront, that we are composite beings of physical side, a spiritual side, and that wherever we go in life, as individuals, as a community, as Am Yisrael, we always have to keep that in mind so that we have to have it at the forefront, our spiritual side, so that we can deal with its needs and its growth, so that we can ultimately reach out to the whole world and teach it about serving Hashem and teach it about godliness and what we're supposed to be doing as humanity, so that we can be Zocheh to Gula Shleim Meher Yameinu. Thank you all. And at this point, I open it up for questions, comments, or feedback, as always. Anybody? Okay, if nobody has no questions, no comments. Okay, thank you all for joining. Have a good rest of the week.